how core this is to the way we view the world. And the third one is a lot about where mathematics is based on. So all of mathematics is based on a few key axioms which say for us to be able to build this whole system, we have to take the most basic things to be true. Axiom of choice and completeness axiom. Which ones can you remember?
Well, it's, the excluded third option
The excluded
basically
third
says something is either true or false, there's no third option. Then there's two of the axioms are actually just to say that there is a number 1, which is such that when you multiply, it's the multiplication axiom that says anything times 1 is that thing itself. 5 times 1 is still 5. And then there's the addition axiom that says anything plus 0 is still itself, so 3 plus 0 is again 3.
And of course the fact
and that those two are not the same.
The number that comes after 1 is 2.
Stop with the math, please.
But sorry, what I'm trying to make here is that these things are core things. I mean, for mathematics, I don't know if you guys know much about, this is Bertrand Russell who went with the Principia Mathematica in the 20th century.
Well, okay, Principia Mathematica is Newton, but
we had to, in the 20th century, we had to go back and prove that 1 plus 1 equals 2 from first principles.
yeah.
Of course, if it wasn't true, it would look at scary because we've got buildings and we've got lives going on, and we've got an economy, and we've got things happening in the world. So it's very important that 1 plus 1 must equal 2, at least on some level.
Yeah, because there was a guy who said 1 plus 1 equals 0, because you've said there has to be a number 0, and there has to be a number 1. You haven't said there has to be another number. There actually isn't an axiom like that. And he said 1 plus 1 equals 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 times 1 is 1, 0 times 0 is 0, and that's all the numbers we have based on your axioms. That's all you've assumed.
And they go.
And so they had to add another assumption to get math back. The point is, you sometimes assume things that you didn't even realize you were assuming, because everyone assumes them.
Yeah. And it's very important to remember. I mean, this is
Where was that guy when I write it in quick exams?
This is like honest medicine. The kids are crazy.
Really? Like, what's my point of 0? That's that. That's the only answer. No X's involved, just that.
You should see how the proofs look like. It's crazy. But the fact of the matter is, even a field like mathematics.
Yeah, sorry, like that's a very relevant question, like that Duan is asking.
What?
How does that apply in debate lab?
I'm coming to that. I think the biggest
I have to get you off the math course.
Yeah, I can. The point I'm trying to show here is that on some level, you have to be aware that you're making assumptions, right? Because most of the time you will be on the side of the foundationalist, which is that. Let me quickly just make this nice. I'll still
just say enable content.
Say the at the top.
As master's degree, man.
screw you.
Basic Shakespeare found.
You need to help MBA students, Cyprian?
No, thank you. When I'm right, I know I'm right.
Okay.
Don't we?
There.
That implies that sometimes you are wrong, or you think you are wrong, which never
What's the middle
happens.
one?
B, just basic B.
Yeah, I'll come to that. I'll come to it. Okay. So here we have a situation. I'm not done with this. Let me just go through this and then we can go to it. So the point is, obviously all three of these positions are not the best to have, right? Most debaters with most of their argumentation will lie under C. We will have to assume that certain things are true, right? So I build in, like, okay, murder is bad. Murder is bad is my axiom, right? This principle, you're not even willing to debate. And in the 14-minute team case, no one is going to ever attack that. You understand? It's really ridiculous. If you've got a solid and very, very simple, very basic axiom, like when it's hot, your sun burns. If you have a very basic axiom, then you are relatively safe in debate. If I go for 1 + 1 = 2, though it took the world thousands of years to get to a point where like, oh, wait a minute, prove it. You understand? So, and with the axiomatic portion of it, it's very important to remember what are your axioms? What are the things you are stating to be true? And if you have to be in a situation where you have to simplify those, then do so and make sure that you analyze everything else that's relevant to the debate. Then,
sorry, can I just interrupt? I get in terms of that certain axioms will be premised on assumptions.
yes.
Right? But what if those assumptions are a little bit more contentious? Something like we have a responsibility to help others.
Then you have to analyze. The thing is, the axiom, in the way that you would have placed it, doesn't require you to explain why in certain situations. So for me to make a point about skin cancer, I don't have to start by explaining that a rays of sun comes and it hits the skin, and then my brain's code, whatever, makes me feel this as heat. Do you understand? The level of analysis you put in is actually what determines whether you're axiom.
So you own discretion to say, will this be a widely accepted
Yes.
assumption or not?
Yes, especially when you're an opening guard, especially against weak teams. Because when you're facing a weak team, chances are they're gonna go for what they think is your axiom. Oh, but you made them try to improve the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, dude, reasonable assumptions that we can carry on and no build the debate here. And then the guy looks ridiculous. But if your basic axiom is just ridiculous, then you don't get credited all that much because you as OG have kind of ruined the debate basically. You put the debate in that corner, and we have to be dealing with this before we can actually go on and discover more things about the debate itself. And that can happen too. I just want you to be aware of it and be aware that more often than not you do tend to make axiomatic premises, and you have to be aware that these things have to be biased the side of simplicity. Occam's razor. Occam's razor. The most simplest answer is usually the best one. Always the best one. Usually the best one. Occam's razor says that if I have got 2 or 3 or 4 options of doing something, and someone has, let's say for instance, I need to go back to Joburg. You guys have shown me 4 different roads. Although all 4 of them will get me to Joburg, how will I choose which one? I'll choose the one that's just easier, according to what I think is easy. So, and you can check the others.
So one going via Bloemfontein won't be chosen.
Yes, for instance.
Unless you like seeing
Unless I can see it. Again, it could change. So remember that. Then you get the guys who, and the reason I put that it's a circular argumentation is you get guys who will be more biased towards the circular argument. Things have to be coherent. A has to be equal to B, has to be equal to C, and the circle of life is formed in terms of argumentation. So here, this is something Michelle does a lot. She will come there in her speech, and she'll start to about her principle. Her principle is A, B, and C, and D, and it's usually something utilitarian or kumbaya.
Like anything, it falls on one of those scales.
But she's got a way of making even the most cogent and brilliant argumentation sound kumbaya, so I guess it's a skill. But you can take your argument from its core premises. You can develop it to the point where this same argument goes and proves your premise in the end. You guys understand what that means?
And the major thing then is everything has to fit along the way. If something doesn't fit along the way, then the circle is broken and you lose.
And then you've got the slippery slope.
Yeah.
So if you are able to say, I can't think of any examples, but if I'm going to be able to say, I think I did make an example of this. The Michelle wears jeans. If it's Thursday, if I see Michelle wearing jeans, I can always assume it's Thursday. That type of argumentation. So predicting behavior is a good way where you use this type of coherentism. When you're referring to historical fact, like this type of thing happened in history because this type of dictator behaved like that. Therefore, can we reasonably expect that that can happen again because of the way it happened in the past? And the principle kind of proved itself by all your examples.
So it's like an example of like Assad, the Assad family. So because his father acted this way, and he is the son of his father, when the son acts this way, he's acting this way because his father did. Okay, it's also the example of like when we were debating Russia and Crimea, then, okay, so previously when Putin decided, well, I'm going to do this to Georgia, he acted this way for this reason and these were the outcomes. So now the same person is doing the same thing to just another piece of land, and so we can assume that Crimea is going to be the same as South Ossetia.
Like with coherentism, isn't there like always a multitude of variables there? Or isn't that the easiest way to refute it?
Yeah, there are always a multitude of variables, but sometimes if you build the argument well enough, there's always an argument to say that the situation under which we put it makes out the large majority of the reason why that happened. Therefore, we think it is more likely to happen. So that's when nuance comes in and saves you if you done it correctly. So the example of this is an argument I once heard about gun control. So it was argued, I think about 10 or 11 examples of kind of dictators in a country who instituted gun control and then subsequently went and committed genocide. Including Hitler, including Mao, including Stalin. And there's a huge list. Okay. One of the last things you do before you take total control of the country and go and kill a whole bunch of people is to go in, say, hey guys, we take away all the guns. And then you go and all the guns out of the country, and you go and you attack the people. Sometimes the argument with this is guns are not necessarily there to protect you from your neighbors. Sometimes the guns are there to protect you from the government. And this is an important thought. If I were to go to social contract, we were going to carry on with this thought and look at why I might need to protect myself from the government and my social contract is seriously wrong. But it's one of those things that you guys need to remember. Look at the trilemma as it stands. So we've got three options. Depending on which option you should choose, at least from those two, you've got a fundamentally different case in debate. You've got a fundamentally different worldview regarding that specific topic. If I'm going to build axioms versus I am going to try and prove the principle through circularity, so to speak, of two fundamentally different ways that go like that. The third one that I'm going to mention here is one that tries to refute everything. The fallibility or the fallibilism. So here, this is also what kind of happens a lot of debate on the rebuttal side to do one. So you very much have a way in which we can come in and we can just try and prove things false as positive argumentation. So for a law to be able to be tested or a certain piece of legislation, we want to know what is the effect of that if it were to happen and if it were not to happen, the said object. Gumino will help me with the perfect words here, what a legalese. But the most important here in example is offense, right? Why can offense not be used as a reason why we create laws? Why can't we, first of all, let's start there, let's see if we can answer this. So I've got a situation where I've got offense in the middle. Let's say, for instance, I say this house would bring quotas, and I talk about, and I'm opening up, and I talk about the racial inequalities of the past, and I talk about Maybe I talk about the what happens in the locker room, and I talk about the racism and all that in there. And if you put more people in the team, at least you have a group of like guys who protect each other. Whatever the case may be, I'm being crazy here. The point is what I'm trying to show here is around offense. Why do we not create laws around the fact that you are offended?
Because it's so subjective.
Subjective is the first one, the most obvious one. So just because I say I am offended, it doesn't mean we should care, and it doesn't prove why you need to be protected. Yeah.
And I think also truth is one. Because sometimes people get offended by truth. So you can't make truth.
So the nice thing about it, as part of living in a world where we are all free to raise our opinions, it means that sometimes your opinions will be tested against what other people's opinions are. And it's very important for you as a member of a pluralistic society for you to not only believe things because you believe them, but you must be able to like back those up with facts. You must be able to have your opinions challenged because they might change, because you might change, and maybe because you want to. Those will inform lots of things about you and about who you are as a person. But most importantly, the idea of offense cannot be falsifiable. You know the falsifiability test. So, and it comes back to subjective. You will never be able to prove that someone is not offended.
You cannot prove that they shouldn't be offended.
Yeah, or shouldn't, yes.
But you can prove that someone shouldn't be offended.
Yeah, they shouldn't be, but are they not? I mean, the question here is about offense itself.
Yeah.
You understand?
But
So
can you not teach them to not be offended?
exactly. So how will we test how a person who is not offended acts? You understand? In a specific context. So my favorite one here was the Ban Muhammad one again, and Open Heart was talking about kind of people get offended by pictures of Muhammad in the media, therefore we should ban it. And the guy's like, what? The fact that you are offended doesn't mean that you shouldn't see the picture. You understand? But how can we test your offense versus someone else's non-offense in any way of determining whether you are offended or not? So we're not able to prove the converse true or the effects of the converse, and if we can say really anything about it. But if I move away from offense and I say agency, now I say the fact that these cartoons exist in public make the Muslims move away from popular discourse about issues of religion, because they're seen as these people who really know nothing because they are offended by people doing something about religion, right? That limits your agency, your ability to be part of pluralistic discourse. And that's something that can be falsified with people detracting away from societies. Or an example, we're seeing this in the US against Christians by and large. By the time you say I am a Christian, by the time you get to any argument about evolution, you get that weird look. Unless, of course, you even agree with evolution, and then you have to deal with the atheist who on a philosophical level, and then you have to refute that first before you can have a meaningful discussion. So all sorts of these social biases that can be created by the way people, for instance, bash organized religion in general, you could argue, could actively impede the way in which you, as a religious person, then are an agent in society. And no one takes you seriously about fashion because you're a Christian, what do you know? No one takes you serious about science because you're a Christian, what do you know? You understand? Those are kind of agency minimizing, falsifiable examples. So that's a very important one. So we can prove that something is just completely false by using kind of the falsifiability test, or we can prove that some of the options you raise through, for instance, foundationalism or Koreanism are just completely unnecessary. And that's just a fun thing about the second half. If you see this, like if you get an aha moment in a debate, your closing count, and you just see the crazy. I had one at nationals that John Mock didn't catch. As my word, thank you. And
I really thought that's a modern man.
I just had to announce that.